The Industrial Revolution was a period of global transition of human economy towards more efficient and stable manufacturing processes that succeeded the agricultural revolution, starting from Great Britain, continental Europe, and the United States, that occurred during the period from around 1760 to about 1820 to 1840. This transition included going from hand production methods to machines, new chemical manufacturing and iron production processes, the increasing use of water power and steam power, the development of machine tools and the rise of the mechanized factory system. Output greatly increased and the result was an unprecedented rise in population and in the rate of population growth. The Industrial Revolution marked a major turning point in history. Comparable only to humanity's adoption of agriculture with respect to material advancement, the Industrial Revolution influenced in some way almost every aspect of daily life. In particular, average income and population began to exhibit unprecedented sustained growth. Some economists have said the most important effect of the Industrial Revolution was that the standard of living for the general population in the Western world began to increase consistently for the first time in history, although others have said that it did not. Etymology: the earliest recorded use of the term Industrial Revolution was in July 1799 by French envoy Louis Galland Motto, announcing that France had entered the race to industrialize in his 1976 book Keywords, A Vocabulary of Culture and Society. Raymond Williams states in The Intrigue for Industry, the idea of a new social order based on major industrial change was clear in Starry and Owen between 1811 and 1818, and was implicit as early as Blake in the early 1790s and Wordsworth at the turn of the 19th century. The term Industrial Revolution applied to technological change was becoming more common by the late 1830s, as in Jerome Edelfie Blanquet's description in 1837 of La Revolution Industrielle. Friedrich Engels in The Condition of the Working Class in England in 1844 spoke of an industrial revolution, a revolution which at the same time changed the whole of civil society. Although Engels wrote his book in the 1840s, it was not translated into English until the late 19th century, and his expression did not enter everyday language until then. Important technological developments. The commencement of the Industrial Revolution is closely linked to a small number of innovations, beginning in the second half of the 18th century. By the 1830s, the following gains had been made in important technologies. Textiles: mechanized cotton spinning powered by steam or water increased the output of the worker by a factor of around 500. The power loom increased the output of the worker by a factor of over 40. The cotton gin increased productivity of removing seed from cotton by a factor of 50. Large gains in productivity also occurred in spinning and weaving of wool and linen, but they were not as great as in cotton. Steam power: the efficiency of steam engines increased so that they used between 1/5 and 1/10 as much fuel. The adaptation of stationary steam engines to rotary motion made them suitable for industrial uses. Invention of machine tools: the first machine tools were invented included the screw-cutting lathe, the cylinder boring machine, and the milling machine. Machine tools made the economical manufacture of precision metal parts possible, although it took several decades to develop effective techniques. Textile manufacture: main article textile manufacture during the British Industrial Revolution. British textile industry statistics. Handloom weaving in 1747. From William Hogarth's Industry and Idleness in 1750, Britain imported 2.5 million pounds of raw cotton, most of which was spun and woven by the cottage industry in Lancashire. The work was done by hand in workers' homes or occasionally in master weavers' shops. Wages in Lancashire were about 6 times those in India in 1771. Overall productivity in Britain was about 3 times higher than in India. Cotton was a difficult raw material for Europe to obtain before it was grown on colonial plantations in the Americas. The early Spanish explorers found Native Americans growing unknown species of excellent quality cotton: Sea Island cotton, Gossypum barbadans, and upland green-seeded cotton, Gossypum hirsutum. Sea Island cotton grew in tropical areas and on barrier islands of Georgia and South Carolina, but did poorly inland. Sea Island cotton began being exported from Barbados in the 1650s. Upland green-seeded cotton grew well in inland areas of the southern U.S. One of the largest segments of this trade was in cotton textiles, which were purchased in India and sold in Southeast Asia, including the Indonesian archipelago, where spices were purchased for sale to Southeast Asia and Europe. By the mid-1760s, cloth was over 3/4 of the East India Company's exports. Indian textiles were in demand in the North Atlantic region of Europe, where previously only wool and linen were available. However, the number of cotton goods consumed in Western Europe was minor until the early 19th century. Pre-mechanized European textile production. A weaver in Nuremberg, c. 1524. By 1600, Flemish refugees began weaving cotton cloth in English towns where cottage spinning and weaving of wool and linen was well established. They were left alone by the guilds, who did not consider cotton a threat. The demand for heavier fabric was met by a domestic industry based around Lancashire that produced fustian, a cloth with flax warp and cotton weft. Flax was used for the warp because wheel-spun cotton did not have sufficient strength, but the resulting blend was not as soft as 100% cotton and was more difficult to sew. On the eve of the Industrial Revolution, spinning and weaving were done in households, for domestic consumption, and as a cottage industry under the pubbing-out system. Occasionally the work was done in the workshop of a master weaver. Under the pubbing-out system, home-based workers produced under contract to merchant sellers, who often supplied the raw materials. In the off-season the women, typically farmers' wives, did the spinning and the men did the weaving. A model of the spinning jenny in a museum in Uppertal. Invented by James Hargreaves in 1764, the spinning jenny was one of the innovations that started the revolution in 1764 in the village of Stanhill, Lancashire. James Hargreaves invented the spinning jenny, which he patented in 1770. It was the first practical spinning frame with multiple spindles. The jenny worked in a similar manner to the spinning wheel, by first clamping down on the fibers, then by drawing them out, followed by twisting. It was a simple, wooden-framed machine that only cost about £6 for a 40-spindle model in 1792 and was used mainly by home spinners. The jenny produced a lightly twisted yarn only suitable for weft, not warp. Spinning frame or water frame was developed by Richard Arkwright who, along with two partners, patented it in 1769. The only surviving example of a spinning mule built by the inventor Samuel Crompton. The mule produced high-quality thread with minimal labor. Bolton Museum, Greater Manchester. Samuel Crompton's spinning mule was introduced in 1779. Mule implies a hybrid because it was a combination of the spinning jenny and the water frame, in which the spindles were placed on a carriage, which went through an operational sequence during which the roller stopped while the carriage moved away from the drawing roller to finish drawing out the fibers. As the spindles started rotating, Crompton's mule was able to produce finer thread than hand spinning and at a lower cost. These advances were capitalized on by entrepreneurs, of whom the best known is Arkwright. He is credited with a list of inventions, but these were actually developed by such people as Kay and Thomas Hayes. Arkwright nurtured the inventors, patented the ideas, financed the initiatives, and protected the machines. He created the cotton mill, which brought the production processes together in a factory, and he developed the use of power, first horsepower and then water power, which made cotton manufacture a mechanized industry. Other inventors increased the efficiency of the individual steps of spinning, carrying, twisting and spinning, and rolling, so that the supply of yarn increased greatly. Steam power was then applied to drive textile machinery. Bar iron was made by the bloomery process, which was the predominant iron smelting process until the late 18th century. In the UK in 1720, there were 20,500 tons of cast iron produced with charcoal and 400 tons with coke. In 1750 charcoal iron production was 24,500 and coke iron was 2,500 tons. In 1788 the production of charcoal cast iron was 14,000 tons while coke iron production was 54,000 tons. In 1806 charcoal cast iron production was 7,800 tons and coke cast iron was 250,000 tons. In 1750 the UK imported 31,200 tons of bar iron and either refined from cast iron or directly produced 18,800 tons of bar iron using charcoal and 100 tons using coke. In 1796 the UK was making 125,000 tons of bar iron with coke and 6,400 tons with charcoal. Imports were 38,000 tons and exports were 24,600 tons. In 1806 the UK did not import bar iron but exported 31,500 tons. Iron process innovations. A major change in the iron industries during the Industrial Revolution was the replacement of wood and other biofuels with coal. For a given amount of heat, mining coal required much less labor than cutting wood and converting it to charcoal, and coal was much more abundant than wood, supplies of which were becoming scarce before the enormous increase in iron production that took place in the late 18th century. B 1750 coke had generally replaced charcoal in the smelting of copper and lead and was in widespread use in glass production. In the smelting and refining of iron, coal and coke produced inferior iron to that made with charcoal because of the coal's sulfur content. Low sulfur coals were known, but they still contain harmful amounts. Conversion of coal to coke only slightly reduces the sulfur content. A minority of coals are coking. By 1709 Abraham Darby made progress using coke to fuel his blast furnaces at Kettlerockdale. However, the coke pig iron he made was not suitable for making wrought iron and was used mostly for the production of cast iron goods such as pots and kettles. He had the advantage over his rivals in that his pots, cast by his patented process, were thinner and cheaper than theirs. Cold pig iron was hardly used to produce wrought iron until 175556, when Darby's son Abraham Darby II built furnaces at Horsey in Ketley where low sulfur coal was available, and not far from Carroll Rockdale. These furnaces were equipped with water-powered bellows.